Hi, welcome to Real Talk. My name is Corey, and today we're going to be talking to Trevor Banka, a high school student from Port Huron Northern High School. Riding 85 miles a day over a 7-week period. That sounds like quite a trip by car. Just imagine it by bicycle. Riding with the wind blowing in your hair, feeling every crack in the road. Feeling frightened as cars blow by you at 3 times your speed. Trevor Banka has experienced all of this.
My name is Trevor Banka. I just recently finished rode my bike across the country. It worked out to be 3,351.4 miles from Seattle, Washington to Washington, D.C. I heard about the bike ride while my dad and my uncle and I were talking around Christmas time, and my dad was asking me what I was going to do for this summer, and I said, well, I was thinking about lifeguarding, of course, the same thing I did last year. And then he told me that he heard of this bike ride he thought for the American Cancer Society, but it worked out as for the American Lung Association that started from Seattle and ended in Washington, D.C. So I got a phone number from a bike shop about the ride, and I called them up, and within about 2 weeks I was signed up for the ride. In order to be accepted by the American Lung Association to do this ride, I was required to raise $6,000 and benefit for the American Lung Association. To do that, I asked about 600 of my closest friends to help me sponsor, and the $6,000 came pretty fast, but I decided to go one past $6,000, and I ended up raising around $15,000 for the American Lung Association. There are a lot of people that helped me out with this. One of my fundraising tactics was we found 30 people that would be willing to raise around $300. If we broke it up, that equals $6,000. And it turned out we had over 600 people donate money to us, or to the American Lung Association. When I was 12, I had osteogenic sarcoma, which is bone cancer, in my right leg. And what happened, they took 6 inches above my knee out, my knee joint, and about 4 inches below my knee, and they put in a titanium prosthesis, which basically consists of a door hinge and a shock absorber, along with a set screw, which a shim slides down and it screws longer. And with having that in my leg, I'm no longer doing any contact sports, so my doctor said I'd be able to bike, golf, swim, and maybe bowl. I'm like, golf and swim, I mean, those don't sound like very good options. So I decided to take up biking, and I really got into it. Now I started to race along with my cross-country ride. I really didn't know anyone on this ride when I signed up. I actually knew no one on the ride. I went out there's 730 people participated in the ride, and it works out that only 20 people were able to finish every mile. Going out there, I became very close. I met one of my best friends on the trip. It turns out that he's from Michigan also. His name is Jared Van Ittersum, and he lives over in Spring Lake, Michigan. There was only around 7 people from the age of 17 to 19 on the ride. The youngest you could be was 17. I was the second youngest, and Jared was the absolute youngest. During the ride, we stayed in tents almost the whole way except 2 nights. 2 colleges, the University of Montana and the University of Minnesota, were kind enough to give us dorms. Besides that, we stayed in tents. Each person had their own tent, and we slept on the ground after we ride. We could sleep anywhere, though, when we were riding. We were so tired. We usually stayed in farmers' fields, state fairgrounds, stuff like that, or sometimes we went in county parks, places like that. Usually shade was something that everyone wanted, so the first people who went there were able to sleep under some shade because it was so hot out there. But besides that, the only shade we had was underneath our tent, which it turned out to be an oven. On my bike, I carried very little. It works out that we had trucks that came along with us that carry all our gear. The only thing I carried with me was like some food that I get from the rest stops, or identification, some money, a bike pump, and an extra tube, so if I got a flat tire. It works out on the very first day, I had 7 flat tires, which is absolutely horrible. Usually, some people didn't have a flat all the way across the country. I'm like, what am I getting myself into? 7 flat tires. So it works out that my rim tape, which protects my tube from the spolk, was just millimeters off, and my spolks were puncturing my tubes. So once we got that fixed, I only had 5 more flats for the rest of the ride. And that's about average to have about 5 flats for about 3,000 miles. It worked out pretty evenly. To eat, we kind of ate anywhere we could find any food. They supplied us with breakfast and dinner, but we were on our own for lunch, which usually we didn't eat lunch because we weren't in the mood for a big meal. We'd pick up like a Power Bar or a Cliff Bar, some sort of high energy food like that. But we ate so much of everything. We ate about every 2 hours, and we had, because while you're riding your bike, you burn between 500 and 800 calories per hour. So doing that, you burn so much food off, you have to keep on taking. I actually got tired of eating. I just ate so much.
We'll be right back after these messages.
Did you know it takes 17 muscles to smile and 42 to frown?
Only 1 person in 2 billion will live to be 116 or older.
Every time you look at a stamp, you're consuming 1/10 of a calorie.
You know the only food cockroaches won't eat is a cucumber?
The winter of 1932 was so cold that the Niagara Falls froze completely solid.
The crack you get when you pop your knuckles is actually a bubble of gas bursting.
There's more brown M&Ms and plain M&Ms than in peanut M&Ms.
We're here in Hawaii for the hockey finals, and I found out one of the most fantastic facts I've ever learned in my entire life. Did you know that the people in Hawaii consume more Spam than anybody else in the entire United States? I couldn't believe it either.
Your stomach has to produce a new layer of mucus every 2 weeks, otherwise it will digest itself.
You're just as likely to die by falling out of bed than you are to get struck by lightning.
Did you know Mel Blancs, the voice of Bugs Bunny, was allergic to carrots?
In the summer, walnuts get suntanned.
Where we were going to stop, it was planned out every day. We'd ride from point A to point B every day, which worked out to be about 85 to 90 miles a day. One day, our shortest day was about 54 miles, and our longest day was, a scheduled day was 120 miles. But Jared and I, we decided, after one great day of riding, we have a huge tailwind, we decided to double up days. So we did, the first day we rode 100 miles, and then back to back we rode another 100 miles. So we did 200 miles in one day. That meant we were one day ahead of the group, and we had 2 days off instead of just 1 day off. During bad weather, we rode. I mean, we had to get to camp somehow, so we just kept on riding and riding. I mean, riding was faster than walking. So one day we had the worst weather that we had. We were climbing the Continental Divide. It was called McDonald Pass in the Rockies, and it was around 7,000 feet. And at about 5,000 feet, where we started to ride that day, it was raining. And once we climbed about 1,000 feet on our bikes, it started to turn into sleet. And at the very peak of the Continental Divide, it turned into complete snow. We were white out. I could not see 20 feet ahead of me. It was crazy. I stopped at the top to. We had bathrooms up there. I stopped there. I got out of the bathroom, and my bike was just covered with ice. It was terrible. Then the descent was even scarier because you're sweating on the way up, and all I had on was some rain gear, which was just like a shell, which kept me dry from the outside, but I was sweating so bad, and I had a pair of shorts and a jersey on, and I was freezing coming down because we didn't pedal, and it was about a 12-mile descent, and we dropped 3,000 feet in 12 miles. So it was quite a steep grade, and we had the wind whipping back and forth. It was absolutely terrible. I never thought I'd be scared coming down a descent, but I was horrified. That was the only time I've ever seen grown men cry. That day, only 30 people out of the 700 people were able to finish. We had over 100 cases of hypothermia. 12 people were serious who were admitted to the hospital and had to stay overnight. And we actually made ABC News that night it was such a tragedy. On the trip, we made a lot of friends, because everyone's in the same boat, that you just have to. Everyone knows you're going through the same thing they are, so you bond with each other, I guess, and you become really close to everyone. Everyone would do anything for each other. Usually, when I ride, I train to race or ride as fast as possible. But out here, it was different because we're just going day after day. Going about 100 miles one day, back-to-back centuries, stuff like that. So you really have to like try to save your like glycogen storages. You have to eat a lot. Usually you're trying not to carry a lot with you, but this type of ride was it was for pleasure, of course. So we stopped wherever we wanted, took a lot of pictures, kind of took our time. If there were days that were boring, like South Dakota, that was a terrible state. I don't want to like offend anyone from South Dakota, but this whole world must live on corn and soybeans. Absolutely terrible. And we had a headwind, and it was about 107 degrees all the way through South Dakota. We hit a heat wave, and it was horrible. We just had to ride. You'd become dehydrated constantly. You'd have to keep on drinking. At that temperature, riding your bike, there's no way to prevent dehydration. You can just like kind of lessen it a little bit. So just kind of keep on drinking, and South Dakota was terrible, but my favorite state would have to be Idaho. It's absolutely gorgeous. We rode next to the same spot where Lewis and Clark traveled. It was along the Clearwater River. The place was absolutely gorgeous. I had a lot of difficulty on the trip. Like the most difficult time I had was we were in Minnesota, and there's actually a virus going around the camp where if people live in that close to quarters, there's really no place to wash your hands, like a lot. I mean, of course, we had bathroom facilities to wash our hands, but there's not like some place to wash constantly. And being that sweaty and sticky all the time, we had a virus going around the camp. And I actually got the virus, and it's called New Ulm, Minnesota, and we had a day off that day. Luckily, we had a day off. And I was actually admitted to the hospital because I had different symptoms. I had to spend a day in the hospital in New Ulm, Minnesota. And there was we were staying in a schoolyard, and in the schoolyard I made a friend with an older gentleman who lives right next door to the schoolyard, and he offered to open up his house to me so I could go and sleep in one of his beds because it was so hot there with the air conditioning. I probably wouldn't be able to ride the next couple days if that didn't happen. Him and his girlfriend really took care of me. That was a great help. If I did this again, I don't think I'd do anything differently besides try not to get sick, that kind of stuff. But all in all, it was great. For other people doing this, I'd highly recommend it to other people. It was a great ride. I think everyone should do it. It was a great way to see the country on a bicycle. It might take a little longer. It took about 48 days, but it was absolutely gorgeous. Prepare for a hard time in the mountains. The Rocky Mountains they're long. They're long, not as steep as the Appalachian Mountains. In the Rockies, we average about an 8% grade, but in the Appalachians, we average around a 12% grade, and we had two or three mountain passes a day in the Appalachians and only one mountain pass in the Rockies. That was per day. And then they're not as high, but the descent pays off coming off on the Appalachians. It's just absolutely a blast. We had people hitting upwards of 60 miles an hour coming down those, just flying. I actually had a friend, we were coming down a mountain, and he's kind of a dangerous rider. He was riding behind me, and then all of a sudden I looked back and he wasn't there. And we had kind of, not a hairpin turn, but it was a sharper turn. And I got to the pit stop about 5 miles after that, and then I kept on waiting for him. He shows up about 20 minutes later, all torn up. It happened that he rode off the side of a mountain and he missed the pole by about 2 feet, but he got caught by the barbed wire fence that was attached to the pole. His jersey was torn. It was absolutely hysterical once we found out he was all right. We had one guy who rode across the country, and he carried a cello the whole way. He was just learning to play the cello. He was absolutely terrible at it. I don't know why he brought it on the trip, but he carried the cello the entire way across the country. We had one person who rode. He only had one leg. Guy was impressive. You never think about complimenting this guy because he would immediately yell at you. He was like the kind that was in Nam and lost his leg, stepped on a landmine or something like that. Nicest guy in the world. He took a liking to me because we both had he doesn't have a leg and I had a bad leg. The guy was fast. He was absolutely incredible. The oldest rider was around 70, he was 73 years old. Guy was nuts. This is his 6th time for riding across the country. He was amazing. He competes in the Olympics, or the Senior Olympics, stuff like that. We had one guy who rode across, and he has no use of his legs at all. He had a hand bike that actually cranks like this. He's real low to the ground. He left us in Madison, Wisconsin for one day, that we had a day off in Madison. he left one day and he went down to Atlanta and he qualified for the 2000 Olympics, the Paralympics. The guy was amazing, huge arms, real nice. We had another lady who was paralyzed, where she also had a hand crank bike, but her and her niece rode together. Her niece's bike attaches right back to the back. She kind of sat in a wheelchair, a lot like this, with a wheel up in front and 2 wheels on the side, and she'd crank her bike, and the niece's bike was attached right to the back, so she'd be able to help push up. We met a lot of great people on the trip. I met one guy in Custer, South Dakota, right by Mount Rushmore and Crazy Horse. This guy, he was like classic example of the West. I sat down, I'm like, please, can I whittle wood with you? He's just like whittling on the porch. He's like, sure, sit down, buddy. So we sat down and started talking to him. He's like, where are you from? I'm like, Michigan. Like he's ever gonna know where Michigan is. I mean, this old guy. He's like, what part of Michigan? I told him, like, like Port Huron, like he's ever gonna know. I'm like, Detroit area around Port Huron. He's like, Port Huron, the Blue Water Bridge. I'm like, no way, man. This guy was absolutely incredible. Turns out that he was, he knew Henry Ford, which he knew the Detroit area, but he also knew Thomas Edison. He knew those two personally. That's how he knew about Port Huron. And then he personally knew Ernest Hemingway and the Rockefellers, which this guy was, I can't believe how well traveled he was. Absolutely incredible. Has been to most of the countries in Europe, all over in the States. Now he sits in South Dakota, or in South Dakota, because that's what he likes. He just kind of sits there. Real cool guy. We had one really hard, rough day, and it was Sheridan to Gillette, Wyoming. We weren't allowed to stop that day because there were so many rattlesnakes in the area. It was 120 miles. It was the longest scheduled day of the trip. Since Sheridan and I doubled up, of course, we did the 200, which is longer than that. But we weren't allowed to stop. It was 107 degrees was the temperature while we're on the bike, and we had a headwind with rolling hills. The day was absolutely hell. I hated every single minute of it. It took us about 11 hours to ride that day because it was so long. And then we had, that night, we had a storm roll in where we had hail so big it killed 2 cows. It dented most people's bikes, and it broke windshields of cars. It was absolutely nuts. If you have hail big enough to kill a cow, that was crazy. We had to sleep in a barn that night because it was so dangerous for us to be outside. It was the night that never ended. It was terrible. One night in Idaho, while we were riding, we had to stay in a gravel pit. And the gravel pit was small enough anyway. It was just terrible night sleeping there. And then anyway, we had so many mountain lions in the area that we weren't allowed to leave camp unless we were with a partner. And in the gravel pit, we had to ride back about 2 miles to get to the gravel pit on this little tiny path, and we're all on like road bikes such as this behind me. This is my bike I rode, and it was absolutely. There's an elk, a fresh kill that this mountain lion just killed the night before we got there. So I'm thinking, what's going to stop this mountain lion from coming in and like eating one of these bikers? It's like the tent is just packaging for them. They can get right through that. But it turns out everyone was safe. And that night we also had moose wandering around the camp, which the moose, they were so cool. They just kind of wander around the camp. You wouldn't go touch, go up to them or anything, but they like gore you into the ground with their antlers. But it was real cool, the wildlife we saw. We ended up not seeing any buffalo. We were really looking for some. We had some friends who saw some. That they went into Yellowstone Park. We didn't ride through there, but they rented a car on one of our days off and went to Yellowstone. And what happened was on the way back, they ran out of gas in this rental car. So they stopped by a farmer's, and they were kind of like looking for some gas. And the farmer comes out with a shotgun and stuff and starts like yelling at him, like, get off my property. So it works out that, once they explain it to him, like, oh, no, don't shoot. They explained it to him, and the farmer like made him, had his wife make him pies and stuff once he found out what they were doing. We found out that people were real accommodating on stuff like that. On the day we did a double day, the 200 miles, we went around and we had no money with us because we weren't really thinking ahead. The only thing we had was our biking clothes and a tank top to wear. We had to wear biking shoes with cleats on the bottom and everything. And that we had a hotel that was donated to us. We also had, at a lesser rate because we had our credit card. And we had the town in Billings was very nice. This is Billings, Montana. They're very nice to us. They gave us a lot of food that they donated. The bike shops donated tune-ups and stuff. It was absolutely great. We stopped in Chicago, just outside of Chicago, and Jared's parents came and picked us up and took us in Chicago for the day. That was a blast. I love that city of Chicago. We rode through a place called Confluence, Pennsylvania. It was terrible there. It was Appalachia, USA. Just the people were, their eyes were a little close. It was a lot like Deliverance. Pretty crazy out there. There's nothing to do, and we had a day off there from riding purely in the Appalachian Mountains. So what we ended up doing was swimming in like mountain waters. It was the clearest water I've ever seen in my life. But we taped two tables together. We had two long tables, and we duct taped an orange up and got some milk jugs. We decided to bowl. We didn't have anything else to do. So that's some of the entertainment we had there. We had 8 days off total, so we were riding a total of 48 days, but we had 8 days off. The first day off was in kind of like anywhere USA. It turned out it was in Washington, and it was we camped along the Columbia River. Absolutely gorgeous there, gorgeous place to camp. The Columbia River is awesome. It was absolutely incredible. The sunsets we had there. We had a day off in Billings, Montana, and also in Missoula, Montana. Missoula is where we had our we had the dorms, which was really nice. There was a big M on top of the mountain for the University of Montana. You could climb up to the M. It was huge. You never think it took us like an hour to climb up there alone. It was pretty neat. Missoula is where all the hippies go to die. That's kind of their claim to fame. That's what they're real proud of. So every car out there, every other car is like a 1908 or 1970 something Beetle. It's really cool. All in great condition. We had another day off in South Dakota, in the capital of South Dakota there. It was great there. We went to Mount Rushmore, saw the fire, and on the 4th of July, we saw the fireworks over Mount Rushmore. This is the only second time they've done it in history because it's been so dry, but they were able to do it. And it was, we had great recognition all the way across the country. We had a day off in New Ulm, Minnesota. That's where I got sick, which wasn't my favorite day off. And then we had a day off in Madison, Wisconsin, which was just incredible. One of my friends that I made on the trip, she had one of her childhood friends owned a brewery there, so we were able to go and play pool and stuff, eat for free there, which was great. We had another day off in Sandusky, Ohio, which my parents came down to see me. It was real good to see them. I didn't want them to come down, but they came down anyway. And I was actually real glad to see them after not seeing them for about 40 days. So it was nice to see them. We went to Cedar Point, which Sandusky, Ohio, that's all it is Cedar Point. Anything else is just, I really didn't like Sandusky that well. Then Confluence, Pennsylvania, which was, I didn't like Confluence at all because there's nothing to do, but it was absolutely gorgeous there. And then the ride into Washington, D.C. was pretty cool. We had another 3 days of riding and through the Appalachians. Hard days of riding, but it turned out that the day that we were riding into Washington, D.C. was only like 50 miles. It was a great day, beautiful weather, and it was about a half mile of people. We were held at the Lincoln Memorial, and we rode into the Washington Monument. There's about a half mile of people, about, I'd say about 5 deep, that just lined where the bikers rode through. It was absolutely incredible. You ride through and everyone's cheering and stuff. It was great. We all had long sleeve T-shirts that they gave us. It was a lot of fun. I was pretty proud of myself to finish this, and I had a lot of family come down to meet me. There's just tons of people. It was a great ride. I'd recommend it for anyone to do. They're actually going to have the ride again next year. If you want information on it, you contact the American Lung Association. This year they've changed it. You have to raise a total of $7,000 instead of $6,000. They're hoping to make this an annual thing. The one that I did, they're hoping to make it bigger this coming up in 1999. But the 1998 Big Ride Across America was the largest cross-country bicycle tour in the history of the United States. So that was also pretty impressive.
Thanks for joining us on Real Talk. Till next time, it's all good.
Did you know, on the average, people fear spiders more than they do death?
You can't kill yourself by holding your breath.
Beatles song, Martha My Dear, was written by Paul McCartney about his sheepdog, Martha.
No two cornflakes look the same.
On the average, Americans eat 18 acres of pizza every day.
Well, today, folks, we'd like to venture a little bit further than the historical accuracy would allow us and tell you the truth about Xing Sen, an 11th century Chinese scientist. He discovered that if you go down far enough, you will eventually be going up. This presupposes he knew that the world was round. Otherwise, if you knew the world was flat, like European scientists at the time thought, you would think that you could go down as far as you possibly could, but never go up. It just goes to show that science and geography sometimes go together. So as you study for your MEPS test this spring, remember that. All subjects interface with each other, except history, which is the mother of all subjects. Thank you very much for tuning in today, and we hope you come back for more useless facts. Oh, incidentally, does anyone know why the gum crossed the road? No, I'm sorry, that's wrong. The gum crossed the road because it was stuck to the chicken's foot. Goodbye.
So next time, it's all good, 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 it's all good.